Zara had always known she was different. She didn't look like the other aliens who lived in the galaxy. While most of them had smooth, shimmering skin and eyes that glowed with the colors of distant stars, Zara's skin was a mix of pale human tones with subtle, glowing lines running across it, traces of her alien side. Her eyes were a strange combination of human brown and alien blue. They sparkled like tiny galaxies whenever she felt any strong emotions. She didn't mind being different at first, but over time, as she grew older, the teasing started. She lived on an alien planet where humans were rare, and the aliens made it clear that they didn't like the idea of someone being half-human. They thought humans were weak, not capable of the advanced technology and knowledge that the aliens had. They didn't see Zara as a real alien, and they certainly didn't see her as someone worthy of respect. Zara's parents had always told her she was special. Her mother was human, and her father was one of the most respected alien leaders on the planet. Zara's birth had been a symbol of hope, an example of what could happen when two different species came together. But instead of admiration, Zara received nothing but mocking stares and hurtful comments. It wasn't her fault, but the aliens refused to see past her human side. Every day, Zara would walk through the streets of the alien city, head down, trying to avoid the whispers. The children would laugh at her and point, calling her names like half-breed or weakling. They would ask why her skin didn't glow as brightly as theirs, or why she couldn't float like the others. Zara hated it, but she tried not to show it. She would hurry to school, keeping to herself, hoping that if she kept quiet and didn't draw attention, they would leave her alone. But the teasing didn't stop. It never did. Every time she sat in class, the other students would sit at least 3 seats away from her, as if her presence was contagious. Even her teachers, who were supposed to be role models, would barely acknowledge her. Some would give her strange looks, like they weren't sure whether she belonged there at all. Zara often wondered why she had been born this way. Why couldn't she be fully alien like everyone else? One afternoon after school, Zara sat by the quiet lake near the edge of the city. The water shimmered under the setting sun, and the trees around her whispered in the wind. Zara liked it here. It was one of the few places where she could think clearly without anyone judging her. She threw a small stone into the water, watching it skip across the surface. "Why am I different?" she whispered to herself. "Why couldn't I be like them?" She didn't expect an answer, but suddenly, a soft voice spoke behind her. "Because you're meant to be something more." Zara turned quickly, surprised to see her father standing there. He was tall and elegant, his alien features perfect, sharp jawline, glowing blue eyes, and skin that shone like silver under the sun. He had always been a strong presence in the city, respected by everyone. But when he spoke to Zara, he always had a gentleness in his voice. "Dad," Zara said, standing up, "why is it so hard to fit in? Why do they always make fun of me?" Her father smiled softly and sat beside her on the grassy bank. "They don't understand you yet, Zara. They don't know what you're capable of. But you will show them one day." Zara frowned. "But what if I don't want to? What if I don't want to be different?" Her father looked at her with a knowing expression. "You are different, Zara, and that is your strength. Never forget that." Zara didn't understand at that moment. She just wanted to be like everyone else. She didn't want to be treated like an outsider anymore. But her father's words stayed with her, echoing in her mind. The next day was the beginning of a new chapter for Zara. She had heard rumors about a special meeting taking place in the city. The most powerful aliens in the galaxy, including the leaders of different factions and planets, would gather for a council meeting to discuss the future of the galaxy. Zara's father was one of those leaders, and because of her hybrid nature, Zara had been invited to attend as well. Zara was nervous. She had never been to such an important event. She had always stayed away from the spotlight, but this time, her father insisted that she come. He told her that this was an opportunity to show the other aliens that being different didn't make her weak. It made her strong. As the day approached, Zara couldn't help but feel a little scared. What if the other leaders mocked her? What if they treated her the same way the children did back home? She tried to push these thoughts aside, reminding herself of her father's words, "You are meant to be something more." But even then, it was hard to believe. How could she ever prove herself to these powerful beings who had everything they could ever want? When the day of the meeting arrived, Zara was dressed in her best clothes. She wore a flowing robe that shimmered with colors that matched both her human and alien sides. She tried to calm her nerves as she followed her father into the grand hall where the council would be held. The room was massive, filled with aliens from all corners of the galaxy. Some were tall, others short. Some had wings, others had glowing tendrils that floated around their bodies. All of them were important. All of them were respected. And all of them turned to look at Zara when she entered. Zara felt her heart race as she walked across the room. She couldn't help but feel their eyes on her. The whispers starting again. She heard one alien leader snicker. "What is she doing here? She's just a hybrid." Another said, "She doesn't belong with us. She's too weak to be part of this council." Zara's hands trembled, but she kept her head high, walking to her place beside her father. The whispers continued, but she tried to block them out. She couldn't let them see her doubt. She had to be strong. But inside, she felt like she was shrinking, like she was about to disappear under the weight of their judgment. As she took her seat, Zara looked around at the alien leaders. They were all so different, so powerful. And then there was her, half human, half alien. She didn't belong here. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But Zara's father sat beside her, his presence calm and steady. She glanced at him, and he gave her a small, encouraging smile. He didn't need to say anything. She knew he believed in her. And somehow, that made her feel a little stronger. The meeting began, and Zara's thoughts drifted. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to belong, to be respected, not because of her father's name, but because of who she was. Maybe her father was right. Maybe one day she would prove them wrong. Maybe that day was coming sooner than she thought. The day of the council meeting had arrived, and Zara was both nervous and excited. It was a big event, and her father had insisted she attend, hoping she would see it as an opportunity to prove herself. But she still wasn't sure if she was ready for what lay ahead. The thought of facing the most powerful aliens in the galaxy terrified her. What if they laughed at her again? What if they treated her like she didn't belong? Zara took a deep breath as she stood beside her father, preparing to enter the grand hall. The doors were enormous, towering over her as they slowly opened, revealing the vast room inside. It looked like a palace, a space filled with floating holograms and shining platforms, where the leaders of various alien factions gathered. Zara couldn't help but stare. She had never seen so many powerful beings in one place before. Each leader had their own unique appearance, representing their species' strength and culture. Some were covered in shimmering scales that reflected the light in rainbow hues. Others had large, powerful wings that fluttered with ease, while a few appeared almost human but with glowing tattoos and shimmering eyes. There were even some leaders who looked like pure energy, with no visible body at all, just floating orbs of light that pulsed with power. Zara, in contrast, felt small. She was just a young hybrid, half human, half alien. Her mixed heritage made her feel out of place in a room full of beings who had lived for centuries and built empires. She could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others judgmental. She lowered her gaze and followed her father into the hall. As they walked further into the room, Zara could hear the quiet whispers and murmurs from the crowd. "Look at her. She's not even fully alien," one voice whispered. "She's just a human in disguise," another murmured. Zara felt the weight of their words pressing on her. Her heart beat faster, and her palms became sweaty. But her father, walking beside her, seemed completely unfazed by the whispers. His face was calm, his posture proud and confident. He didn't seem to notice the stares. But Zara couldn't ignore them. She felt like everyone in the room was judging her, sizing her up, wondering what she could possibly contribute to such an important meeting. Finally, they reached their seats at the front of the hall. Zara sat down next to her father, feeling the weight of the ice still on her. She glanced around the room, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. She noticed a few leaders exchanging looks, whispering behind their hands. One of them, a tall alien with dark metallic skin, leaned toward the alien sitting next to him and muttered something that made them both laugh. Zara could tell they were laughing at her. She tried to ignore it. She had been mocked her whole life, and she had learned how to block it out. But deep down, it still hurt. She wanted to scream, to tell them all how wrong they were about her. But she stayed silent, keeping her focus on her father, who was now speaking to another leader across the room. The council meeting officially began with a loud, deep voice echoing through the hall. It was the voice of the council's leader, an imposing alien named Vrax, who had ruled over countless planets for centuries. His appearance was striking, tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished obsidian. His eyes glowed bright yellow, and his sharp, angular features gave him an intimidating look. Zara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe whenever he spoke. But even as he addressed the room, Zara noticed how the others treated him with deep respect, while she was barely acknowledged. Today, we gather to discuss the future of the galaxy. Vrax's voice boomed. We have much to plan, much to decide. The alliances we form today will determine the fate of countless species across the stars. Zara tried to focus on the meeting, but her mind kept drifting. Every now and then, her eyes would wander to the other leaders. Some were listening intently, others whispered to their neighbors. Every so often, Zara could catch bits of conversation. Most of it was about strategies for new colonies or military alliances, but Zara noticed that many of the leaders avoided looking at her directly. They seemed to find her presence uncomfortable. Zara couldn't help but wonder if they were just waiting for her to say something foolish. As the meeting continued, Zara began to feel more and more isolated. No one seemed to care about what she had to say. She had always been taught to be respectful and silent in the presence of the council, but today felt different. Her father had insisted that she attend, but she had no idea why. What could a young girl like her possibly offer to such a powerful group of beings? Then, something unexpected happened. Vrax, the leader of the council, paused in the middle of his speech and looked directly at Zara. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. All eyes turned toward her. Zara felt her stomach tighten, and her heart began to race again. What did he want from her? Was he going to mock her too? Zara, Vrax said, his voice deep and commanding, you are a hybrid, half human, half alien. You are an unusual presence here, but I wonder, what is your opinion on the future of our galaxy? Zara froze. The entire room was waiting for her to speak. Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't prepared for this. She hadn't expected to be called on. She looked at her father quickly, but he was calm, nodding as if he knew this moment would come. Zara cleared her throat, trying to steady her nerves. She could feel the eyes of the room still on her. The weight of their judgment pressed down on her like 1,000 tons, but her father's words echoed in her mind. You are meant to be something more. She opened her mouth, her voice shaky at first, but as she spoke, her confidence slowly grew. I believe the future of the galaxy should be about unity, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. We have so many different species, all with different strengths and weaknesses. But instead of focusing on our differences, we should focus on how we can work together. The room was quiet. Zara's words hung in the air, waiting for a response. For a moment, no one said anything. She could feel the tension, like a thick cloud hanging over the council hall. Zara continued, her thoughts flowing freely now. I've been told my whole life that I'm not fully one thing or the other, that I'm too human to be truly alien, and too alien to be human. But I'd learned that being different isn't a weakness, it's a strength, because it gives me the ability to see things in a way that others can't. She paused, taking a deep breath. The galaxy is full of conflicts, but it's also full of potential. If we can learn to unite, to respect each other, we can build a future that benefits everyone, not just the powerful few. The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, Zara thought she had made a mistake. Maybe she had said too much. But then something incredible happened. One by one, the alien leaders began to nod. They exchanged glances with each other, their expressions thoughtful. Vrax, the leader of the council, looked at Zara with an unreadable expression. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "You speak with wisdom beyond your years, Zara. Perhaps there is more to you than we realized." Zara felt a rush of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had spoken up, and for the first time, the council was listening. The leaders who had once mocked her now seemed to be considering her words carefully. Zara's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Could it be that she had actually earned their respect? As the meeting continued, Zara stayed quiet, watching the leaders discuss the future of the galaxy. But now she felt different. She no longer felt like an outsider. For the first time, she felt like she had a place in this world, a world that had once rejected her. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur for Zara. She was still processing what had just happened. She had spoken in front of the council, and they had listened. It was a small victory, but to Zara, it felt like the first step toward proving that she was more than just a hybrid girl. By the time the meeting ended, Zara had gained something she had never expected. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as powerless as she had once believed. The council meeting ended in a way Zara had never expected. As she walked out of the grand hall with her father, she could feel the weight of what had just happened slowly sinking in. She had spoken, and the council had listened. But what did that mean for her now? Was this just a momentary victory, or could she actually make a difference? Zara walked beside her father, her mind racing with thoughts. She had never felt more alive, more powerful. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a burden or an outsider. She felt like she had something to offer, like she had proven to everyone that being a hybrid didn't make her weak. It made her strong. "Dad, did you see that?" Zara asked, her voice full of wonder. "They actually listened to me." Her father smiled down at her, his face full of pride. "I knew you could do it, Zara. You've always had that strength inside you. You just had to find it." Zara couldn't stop smiling. She had never felt this confident before. She had spent so much of her life being ashamed of who she was, ashamed of being different. But today, she had shown the galaxy that her differences were her strength. She wasn't just a hybrid girl anymore. She was someone who could change the world. As they walked back to their home, Zara's mind kept replaying the council's reactions. She had seen the surprise in their eyes when she spoke. It was like they hadn't expected her to be so powerful. The alien leaders who had once mocked her, who had dismissed her as weak, were now looking at her differently. Zara could see it in the way they spoke to her father. Their words were more respectful now, less mocking. It was a small change, but to Zara, it meant everything. When they finally reached their home, Zara's father turned to her and said, "You did well today, Zara. But this is just the beginning. You have a long way to go. There will be challenges ahead, and not everyone will agree with your ideas." Zara nodded, but she was still riding the high of her success. She had proven herself, and now maybe things would be different. Maybe the other aliens would stop treating her like an outsider. Maybe they would start to see her for who she really was. The next few days were a blur of meetings and discussions. Zara's father had been invited to several high-level talks with the other leaders, and Zara found herself spending more time around the council members. They no longer treated her like an invisible girl in the background. Now they looked at her with a mix of curiosity and respect. Zara couldn't believe it. This was what she had always wanted, to be seen, to be heard. But as the days went on, Zara began to notice something. While the leaders had started to acknowledge her, not everyone was happy with her newfound confidence. Some of the other council members, especially the older ones, seemed uncomfortable with Zora's presence. Zora noticed them whispering among themselves when she walked into a room. They didn't seem to trust her or her ideas. Zora couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. She had proven herself in the council meeting, but now it seemed like there were some leaders who still didn't believe she belonged there. She wasn't sure if it was because of her hybrid nature or because of the way she had shaken things up, but there was definitely something in the air, a tension that made her feel like she was walking on thin ice. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Zara and her father sat together in their living room. It was a quiet place, a place where Zara could think clearly. Her father had been teaching her about the history of the galaxy and the responsibilities that came with their position. He often spoke about the importance of unity and how leaders needed to look beyond their differences to make the galaxy a better place. Zara understood, but she was beginning to feel like there were forces working against her. "Dad," Zara began, her voice hesitant, "I've been noticing something lately. Some of the leaders are treating me differently. At first, they seemed impressed, but now I feel like they're starting to doubt me again." Her father turned to her, his face serious. "Zora, there will always be those who resist change. Some of the leaders you've spoken to may see your ideas as a threat. They've been in power for a long time, and they don't want to give it up. They'll try to undermine you, but that's when you have to be even stronger." Zora's heart sank. She had hoped that everything would change overnight, that the respect she had earned would be enough to convince everyone. But her father's words made sense. The galaxy was full of power struggles. Leaders didn't just give up their control easily. "I understand," Zara said quietly, "but what do I do if they try to stop me? What if they say my ideas aren't worth anything?" Her father smiled gently, his eyes full of understanding. "You keep going, Zara. You stay true to your beliefs. You fight for what's right. You've already proven that you have the power to make a difference. Don't let anyone take that from you." Zora nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let anyone push her back into the shadows. She had come too far to give up now. The next few days were filled with more council meetings, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The leaders who had once been so open to her ideas were now more distant. They would nod politely when she spoke, but they didn't seem as interested in what she had to say. Some of them even seemed annoyed, like they were just waiting for her to stop talking. Zara tried to ignore it, but it was hard. She couldn't help but feel that the respect she had earned was slipping away. It was as if the more she pushed for change, the more resistance she faced. She began to wonder if the council meeting had just been a fluke, a moment of good luck that wouldn't happen again. Then one afternoon, Zara was called into another meeting with her father and the other council leaders. She walked into the room, expecting the usual polite nods and brief discussions, but when she entered, she immediately noticed a change in the atmosphere. The room was tense, and all eyes turned to her as she sat down. Vrax, the leader of the council, stood at the front of the room, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something darker. "Zara," he said, his voice cold, "you've had your say. You've given your opinions, and we've listened. But now, it's time to consider the future of our galaxy." Zara's heart skipped a beat. The tone in Vrax's voice made her uneasy. She looked around the room at the other leaders. They were all watching her closely, their expressions unreadable. "We've discussed your ideas," Vrax continued, "and while they may have some merit, we have decided that your approach is too risky. The galaxy is not ready for such drastic changes." Zora's stomach tightened. She had known this was coming, but hearing the words out loud made it feel real. They were rejecting her ideas. They didn't believe in her vision for a united galaxy. "I understand," Zora said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But what's the alternative? If we don't change, we will never be able to move forward. The galaxy will stay divided forever." Vrax's eyes narrowed. "Change takes time, Zora. You cannot force it upon us. We will decide when the time is right." Zara felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had done everything right. She had spoken with passion, with belief, but now it seemed like all her hard work was being undone. She wanted to shout, to argue with them, but she knew it wouldn't help. Instead, Zara stood up and looked directly at Vrax. "You may not be ready for change now, but I will not stop fighting for it. I believe in what I'm doing, and I will not back down." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke, but Zara didn't care. She had made her point. No matter what, she wouldn't let anyone silence her. Zora left the council room feeling defeated. The words of Vrax and the other leaders echoed in her mind. Too risky. Not ready for change. They had dismissed her ideas so easily, as if all the hard work she had put in meant nothing. It was as if they didn't even hear her. Zara couldn't understand how they could be so blind. Didn't they see the potential of unity? Didn't they realize how much better the galaxy could be if they all worked together? Her father had always told her that change took time. He had warned her that the path ahead would not be easy. But hearing those words, knowing that the council had decided against her vision, felt like a punch to the stomach. She had worked so hard, and yet it seemed like nothing had changed. When she returned home, Zara went straight to her room. She didn't want to talk to anyone. She didn't want to face her father's disappointed gaze or the sympathy in his eyes. He always tried to help, but this time, Zara didn't think there was any way to fix things. The council had made up its mind. She had failed. But as she sat on her bed, staring out the window at the stars, something began to change inside her. She couldn't just give up. She couldn't let them win, not when she believed so strongly in her vision. She had always been told that she was different, that she didn't belong. But now, more than ever, she understood that being different was her greatest strength. It was time to prove to the galaxy that change was possible, even if it meant doing it on her own. Zara stood up, feeling the weight of her decision settle in her chest. She wasn't going to let the council define her future. She wasn't going to let their fear of change stop her. There had to be another way, a way to make them see that unity was the only way forward. She had to find a way to break through their resistance. The next few days were a blur of planning and strategizing. Zara knew that she couldn't just keep pushing the same ideas to the council. She needed to find a way to make them see her vision, to show them that the future of the galaxy depended on unity. But how could she do that when the leaders were so set in their ways? How could she convince them that their way of thinking was outdated and dangerous? Zara spent long hours in her room, studying maps of the galaxy and researching the history of the council. She learned about the alliances that had been made in the past and the wars that had been fought over resources and power. She saw how much pain and suffering had been caused by the divisions between the different species. It was clear to her now that the council's way of doing things wasn't working. The galaxy needed something different. It was then that she came up with an idea. What if she could show them the consequences of their actions? What if she could make them see what would happen if they continued down the same path? If she could make them understand the stakes, maybe they would be forced to listen. Zara knew that it was risky. It was a bold move, one that could backfire. But it was the only option she had left. She couldn't just sit back and let the galaxy continue to fall apart. She had to do something. With her plan in place, Zara went to find her father. She knew that she couldn't do this alone. He had always been her guide, her rock. And now, more than ever, she needed his support. "Dad, I need to talk to you," Zara said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "I have a plan." Her father looked at her with concern in his eyes. "Zara, what are you thinking? You know the council won't accept your ideas easily. They've made it clear that they don't believe in your vision." "I know," Zara replied. "But I think I can make them see. I can show them the consequences of their actions. If they don't change, the galaxy will be divided forever. There will be more wars, more suffering. I can prove it to them." Her father hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowing as he thought. "It's a dangerous path, Zora. You're putting yourself in a very difficult position. The council is powerful. They may not take kindly to your approach." "I know," Zora said, her voice firm. "But I have to try. If I don't, things will never change. I can't sit back and watch the galaxy fall apart." Her father studied her for a long moment, and then, to Zora's surprise, he nodded. "If you believe this is the right path, then I will support you, but you must be careful. The Council is not as forgiving as they seem." Zora smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. She had her father's support, and that meant everything. With his help, she could start putting her plan into action. She had no idea what the outcome would be, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to give up. Over the next few weeks, Zora worked tirelessly, gathering information, speaking to people, and preparing the evidence she would need to make her case. She knew that the Council needed to see the reality of what their decisions were doing to the galaxy. She would show them the consequences of their actions. She would prove that if they didn't change, the galaxy would be lost. As she gathered the information, Zora began to form alliances with other leaders who were also frustrated with the Council's inaction. Some of them were hesitant to get involved, afraid of the backlash they might face, but Zora was determined. She knew that if she could get enough support, she might be able to turn the tide in her favor. One of the leaders she spoke to was a powerful alien named Raxus. He was the leader of a large fleet of ships and had been at the forefront of several failed peace talks in the past. Zora had heard that he was a fierce warrior, but she had also heard that he was open to new ideas, especially when it came to protecting his people. "Raxus, I need your help," Zora said, standing before him in his grand hall. "The Council is not listening. They are too focused on their own power to see the bigger picture. If we don't do something now, the galaxy will be lost." Raxus looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "And what do you suggest we do?" "The Council is too strong. If we defy them, it could mean war." Zora didn't flinch. "I don't want war. But if we don't act, we will end up with more of it. I have a plan to show the Council the consequences of their decisions. I need your support." Raxus considered her words for a long time before speaking again. "I've seen what you can do, Zora. If you think this is the way forward, I'll stand with you, but you must be prepared for the consequences." Zora nodded. "I am. I won't stop until we get the change we need." With Raxus on her side, Zora felt a renewed sense of determination. She had allies now. She wasn't alone in this fight. But even with the support of powerful leaders, Zora knew that her plan was risky. She was about to go up against the most powerful force in the galaxy, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had come this far, and she was ready to do whatever it took to make a difference. Zora's plan was set in motion. She was going to take a bold step, one that would either change the galaxy forever or destroy everything she had worked for. But no matter the outcome, she knew she had made the right choice. She was no longer the girl who was afraid of being different. She was a leader in her own right, and she was going to fight for the future of the galaxy. The day of the presentation was fast approaching, and Zora felt a growing sense of tension in the air. Her plan was set, and her allies were ready, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. What if it didn't work? What if the Council rejected everything she had worked so hard for? The risk was enormous, but she couldn't turn back now. Zora stood in front of the large display screen in her room, reviewing the final details of her presentation. She had worked tirelessly to gather evidence, speak to key figures, and form alliances with leaders like Raxus. She knew that her argument was strong. She had proof of the galaxy's suffering, of the wars, and the divided species that could be brought together. But even with all the facts on her side, Zora still felt unsure. It was one thing to believe in her vision, but would the Council? Would they truly understand the importance of change? Or would they see her as just another dreamer, someone who didn't fully grasp the reality of the galaxy's power struggles? "Zora," her father's voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face calm but filled with concern. "Are you ready?" Zora took a deep breath and nodded. "I think so, Dad. But it still feels big." Too big. What if they don't see it? What if they reject everything? Her father smiled gently and walked over to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You've done everything you could, Zora. Your heart is in the right place, and you've prepared well. Now all you can do is show them what you believe. No one can predict the future, but you can't give up now. You've come this far. Zora looked up at him, her chest filled with a mix of fear and hope. Her father's confidence in her was all she needed. If he believed in her, maybe she could believe in herself a little more. She knew this was her chance to prove that her vision could work, to prove that the galaxy didn't have to be divided forever. I'm ready, Zora said, her voice steady. Let's do this. The council meeting was set to take place in the Grand Hall, a massive room with high ceilings and a floor made of polished stone. It was a place where important decisions were made, and today, Zora was determined to be heard. She and her father arrived early, and Zora immediately noticed how different the room felt this time. The council members were already seated at their long table, speaking in low voices, as if they were waiting for something or someone. When Zora and her father entered, every eye in the room turned to them. For a brief moment, she felt a wave of fear rush through her, but she pushed it aside. This was her moment. She couldn't afford to show weakness. She walked confidently to the front of the room, where a large display screen was already set up. The council members watched her closely, their faces unreadable. Vrax, the leader of the council, sat at the head of the table, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a hint of curiosity. Zora knew that he was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and if she could convince him, she could convince the others. Zara, Vrax said, his voice calm but with an edge of authority. We are here to hear what you have to say, but I must remind you that we have already made our decision. We've reviewed your ideas, and we believe they are too dangerous. Zara stood tall, meeting his gaze. I understand your concerns, Vrax, but I ask you to look at the facts, not just your fears. The galaxy is suffering, species are fighting, and the resources are running out. If we continue down this path, the future will be filled with more conflict and division. I believe we can do better. I know we can do better. She pressed a button on the display screen, and a series of images appeared. Zara showed them maps of the galaxy, highlighting areas that had been devastated by war. She pointed to planets that had been left in ruins, populations decimated, and resources destroyed. She shared stories of species that had been forced to live in poverty while others hoarded wealth. The images were harsh, but they were necessary. The truth had to be seen. The galaxy is on the brink, Zora continued. We have the power to change it, but only if we come together. If we remain divided, the suffering will continue. If we choose unity, we can heal the wounds and build a better future for all of us. There was a long silence after Zora finished speaking. The council members exchanged looks, but no one said anything. Zora felt her heart race. She had done everything she could, but would it be enough? Finally, Vrax spoke. Your vision is bold, Zora, but it is not an easy path. The galaxy is not ready for such drastic changes, and the cost of failure would be high. Zora's breath caught in her throat. She had known that the council would be hesitant, but hearing those words made everything feel so much more real. Failure could cost them everything, but she didn't back down. We cannot wait for the perfect moment, Vrax. The longer we wait, the worse it will get. The galaxy is already falling apart. We need to act now. The room was still, the tension thick in the air. Zora could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had made her case, and now it was up to the council to decide what came next. Suddenly, a voice from the side spoke up. It was Raxus, the leader of the fleet who had joined Zora's cause. His deep, gravelly voice cut through the silence. I've seen the truth of what Zora says, Raxus said, standing up. I've led battles in the past, fought to protect my people. But I've also seen what happens when we remain divided. We cannot continue this way. It's only a matter of time before we destroy ourselves. Zora turned to Raxus, a sense of gratitude flooding her. She had known that he had experience, but hearing him speak so passionately made her believe that they could win. "I stand with Zora," Raxus continued, "and I believe we must change. If the Council does not take action, I fear the galaxy will be lost." There was a murmur of surprise around the room. Zara could see the other council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They had never expected Raxus to support her. He was known for his strength and his skepticism toward new ideas, but here he was, standing with her.